Any kind of system is a group of objects, or in this case organs, that can be defined as having interaction with each other. So if I have a beaker full of some kind of substance, that can be a system. Now, of course, when we're talking about the body, we're not talking about a beaker full of liquid. We're talking about a bunch of organs and tissues working together. So in the case of the human body, you're dealing with the skeletal system, you're dealing with the muscular system, okay, you're dealing with the circulatory system. And on your notes, the skeletal muscular system is interconnected. Now, these divisions, when we call this a system or that a system, is kind of arbitrary. In other words, it depends on who's defining it. So different hospitals or different research facilities will look at just the skeletal system. They'll say, we're just going to look at the bones. Most hospitals and organizations will look at the musculoskeletal system, and the reason is because these two systems work very closely together. So all the muscles need the bones in order to pull. Because if you're going to pull, you need to be holding on to something, right? And so if you have muscle, in order for muscle to pull or contract, it has to be connected to something. That thing that it's connected to is the skeleton or the bone. The circulatory system is closely related to the respiratory system. And so often these two will be connected in some way, or grouped together in a hospital or research facility. But the circulatory system, it has specific organs that's involved with it. And the respiratory system has another set of organs that is involved with it. And you're supposed to, when you go through your packets, this cat anatomy package, you're supposed to look at which organs are grouped into the circulatory system, which organs are grouped into the respiratory system. And then you have to be able to identify those organs. So for the circulatory system, I hope you know it's the heart, right, and the veins and the arteries. And you have to understand what is the... When I give you a picture of it on the exam, you have to be able to tell me, well, that's part of the circulatory system. When you're looking at the digestive system, that it starts with the mouth and the teeth and the throat, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and etc., all the way out to the anus. So from the mouth to the anus, everything that has to do with the digestive system. Now, a key point with the digestive system is you have to consider that anything that goes into your mouth until it comes, even after it leaves your butt, your anus, that material is never inside the body unless it's absorbed by the digestive system. The whole point of the digestive system is to absorb nutrients into your body. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the liver's function is. On that note, the package says that the liver is the largest organ of your body. It really isn't. It's your integumentary system or your skin, which is not listed here. Often the skin is left out in any discussion. The skin is actually the largest organ of your body and arguably one of the most important. You have the urinary system, which consists of the kidneys and the bladder and the urethra. The nervous system, the reproductive system, the lymphatic system, and endocrine system, and of course we just mentioned earlier the respiratory system. So these systems have to interact with one another. So one of the key points is that none of these systems can be separate and isolated and say, okay, well, this circulatory system is going to operate on its own. In a human body, they need to interact with one another. They have to work with one another. Otherwise, obviously, they're not going to work at all. So we separate them in order to study them, in order to understand how each system works. That's the only reason we're separating them. But as a body, they have to work together in tandem. When you're talking about the levels of life, you have to consider the smallest component of life to the largest component of life. Now, there's another concept. There are things that are smaller than the cells. Okay, there's many things that are smaller than cells. Probably one of the most important ones, and one that we'll be talking about a lot, is atoms. Okay, so you have to consider that cells are made of atoms. Another thing that is also smaller than cells, that are also made of atoms, are molecules, and we'll be talking a lot about molecules. So it goes from atoms to molecules, then to cells. Okay, so atoms, molecules, cells, and then from cells to tissues, from tissues to organs, from organs to organ systems, which we just talked about. So this is the kind of the main focus of the exam on Friday. But you need to know this order of cell of life so that you have some idea of what we're talking about. So a bunch of organ systems working together, we call it an organism. So you're an organism because you're a bunch of organ systems all working with one another. A bunch of organisms working with one another, we call it a population. A bunch of populations working together, we call it a community. A bunch of communities working together, we call it an ecosystem. Again, there's that word system. So any kind of arbitrary group of things that are working together, we call it a system. In this case, it's an ecosystem because it's a community. So the ecosystem then works together, and we call it a biome. In a biome, all the biomes working together, we call it a biosphere. So we move from atoms here to biosphere here, and it goes through all the levels that make up the things we call life. So you need to know that order of things because that will be on the exam on Friday. But also, it gives you some kind of perspective when we start to talk about all the different parts, when we start talking about molecules, when we start talking about ecosystems. This year, I'm thinking we're going to start with the ecosystem. I don't like to do that. I like to start with atoms and move up. I think it makes more sense. But your end-of-year exam is coming up sooner rather than later. And I'm told that we should start with ecosystem because of the organization. That test is forcing us to do so. So we're going to go ahead and start then with the atoms or with ecosystems, and we're starting we're kind of starting a little bit, as I told you before, we're starting a little bit out of order when we're starting with this dissection anatomy, and that's simply because we have an opportunity to go see the human anatomy in action. So we're going to go ahead and finish this body systems this week, and then start to delve into the community, the ecosystem, the biome, the biosphere, and then move on down to the cells later on. So what is it you need to know for the exam as far as the systems are concerned? Just remember that you have a bunch of organs, as you see here, and these organs, whether it be the brain, the heart and its veins and arteries that are connected to it,